The last words my sister said echoed in the silent wedding hall. And that's why Karen couldn't have children of her own. The air turned to ice. 200 pairs of eyes burned into me. My husband's hand, which had been holding mine, went limp. A glass fell from someone's table and shattered, the sound as loud as a gunshot in the dead quiet. My sister, Chloe, stood on the stage, a perfect bride in a white dress, holding a champagne flute. She had a small, sad smile on her face, the kind of smile that said, "I'm sorry I had to tell everyone your deepest, darkest secret." But her eyes told a different story. They were shining. My name is Karen Rodriguez. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a third-grade teacher in a small town in Ohio. I live a quiet life. I bake pies for the neighbors, I walk my golden retriever every morning, and I love my husband, David, more than anything in the world. We've been trying for a baby for 5 years. 5 years of secret doctor's visits, of quiet tears in the bathroom, of pretending to be happy at baby showers. It was our secret pain, a private mountain we were climbing together. And my sister had just turned it into public entertainment at her wedding. Chloe has always been the pretty one, the popular one. While I was in the library, she was at parties. While I was saving money for a small house, she was traveling the world on our parents' dime. She was the sun, and I was her shadow. I thought I had made peace with that. I thought we were finally friends, especially when she asked me to be her maid of honor. I spent months helping her plan this perfect day. I wrote a speech filled with love, with funny childhood memories, a speech that made people cry happy tears just 30 minutes ago. I watched as her new husband, a rich man named Greg, put his arm around her. He looked confused. He glanced from Chloe to me, his brow wrinkled. My own husband, David, looked like he had been punched. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a question I couldn't answer right now. Our parents, sitting at the head table, looked down at their plates. They were not shocked. They were ashamed. Ashamed of me. It was a feeling I knew very well. Their silence was the knife that twisted deepest in my heart. The secret she shared wasn't even the whole truth. It was a twisted, cruel version of a choice I made when I was a scared 17-year-old girl. A choice I made to protect someone else. A choice my parents forced me into to avoid a scandal. They told me it would be our family secret, locked away forever. And they had promised me they would never tell Chloe. They had lied. I could see it in their faces. They had chosen her side, just like they always did. This wasn't just Chloe's betrayal. It was theirs, too. Chloe leaned toward her new husband, thinking her speech was over and the microphone on the stand was off. She whispered, but the mic was sensitive. It picked up every single hateful word and broadcasted it to the entire room. "See," she whispered, a smug little sound. "I told you I'd get her back for stealing David from me in college. Now everyone knows how damaged she is." The room let out a collective gasp. David turned to look at me, his eyes now filled not with confusion, but with a dawning horror and understanding. And that's when I felt it. A small, heavy object clipped to the collar of my dress. My own microphone. The one I had used for my Maid of Honor speech. In all the chaos, no one had come to take it off me. A tiny green light was glowing. It was still on. It was still live. A slow, cold feeling spread through my chest, chasing away the hurt and the shame. It was the feeling of power. Chloe thought she had the last word. She thought she had won. She didn't realize that the game was just beginning. For years, I had been the good daughter, the quiet sister. I had swallowed every insult, forgiven every betrayal. I had taken the high road so many times that I felt like I lived in the mountains. What would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet? Would you have run out of the room crying? For a second, I wanted to. I wanted to disappear. But then I looked at Chloe's smiling face, and I saw the faces of my parents, who had thrown me away to protect their own reputation. And I knew, right then, that the high road was closed for good. I took a breath. The sound was a soft hiss that carried through the speakers, and every head in the room snapped toward me. I could feel David's eyes on me, begging me to be careful. I could feel my sister's smile start to fade as she realized her mistake. I thought about the life she was about to start, built on money and lies. I thought about the perfect wedding day she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. And I decided I was going to give her a wedding gift she would never, ever forget. With 200 people watching, I lifted my hand slowly, my fingers brushing against the small black microphone. My heart was pounding, but my hand was steady. I looked right at my sister, right into her panicked eyes. Then I looked at my parents, who were now staring at me in pure terror. I was about to burn their perfect little world to the ground, and I was finally ready to light the match. If you want to find out what I said next, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss chapter 2. My story is just getting started, and trust me, you'll want to see how it ends. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, back to the wedding. I leaned forward, my lips almost touching the mic, and I said my first word. Wow. That was the first word I said. It wasn't angry or loud. It was a soft, breathy sound, but the microphone carried it to every corner of the room. Wow, Chloe. I kept my eyes locked on my sister's. Her triumphant smile had vanished, replaced by a flicker of confusion. She expected tears. She expected me to run. She did not expect me to stand there, in the spotlight she had created, and speak. My father started to stand up, his face red with anger, but my mother pulled him back down, her hand a claw on his arm. She knew what I was capable of. I gave the stunned guests a small, sad smile of my own. Please, forgive me, I said, my voice as smooth as glass. This is not how I wanted to spend my sister's wedding day. But since she has decided to share a piece of my story, I feel it's only fair to tell the rest of it. The whispers in the room died instantly. Chloe's new husband, Greg, took a small step away from her. He was looking at me now, really looking at me, with a strange curiosity. The hunter was now the one being watched. My sister is right, I continued, my voice never shaking. When I was 17, I had a baby. A beautiful little boy. I saw my husband, David, flinch. This was new to him, and my heart ached for it. But Chloe left out a few key details. She forgot to mention why I had to give him up. She forgot to mention who the father was. And most of all, she forgot to mention her role in all of it. That was the hook. I had them. Every single person in that room was leaning forward, desperate to know what came next. The fancy ballroom faded away, and for a moment, I was 17 again. I wasn't in a bridesmaid dress, I was in my old high school cheerleading uniform. Chloe was the captain, of course. She was perfect, and I was clumsy. She dated the football captain, and I dated the quiet boy from the library, Mark. He was sweet and kind, and he was my first love. He didn't care that I was Chloe's awkward little sister. He saw me. And in the safety of his love, I made a mistake that would change my life forever. I remember the night I told my parents. I was sitting on the expensive white couch in our living room, the little plastic stick from the pregnancy test feeling like a bomb in my hand. My mother didn't hug me. She didn't ask if I was okay. Her first words were, "What will people say?" My father started talking about my future, about college, about the family's reputation. It wasn't a conversation, it was a business meeting. And I was the failing product that needed to be recalled before it damaged the brand. They cared more about the neighbors' whispers than their own daughter's tears. But here is the part Chloe never knew. Here is the secret my parents kept even from her. Mark, my sweet boyfriend, wasn't just some library kid. His father was a very important man in our town, my father's boss. If the story came out, my father's career would be over. My family's perfect image would be shattered. So, they made me a deal. They would handle everything, send me away for a few months to visit an aunt, and in return, I would sign the papers and never speak of it again. I wasn't just giving up my son, I was erasing him. I snapped back to the present. I looked at David, my rock, my true love. "David," I said, my voice softening, the microphone picking up the tremble. "I am so sorry. I was going to tell you. I was just so scared." He looked at me, his eyes full of a million questions, but he gave me a tiny, almost invisible nod. It was enough. It was the signal I needed. He was still on my team. That's when I knew I could do this. I turned my attention back to the bride. Her face was now as white as her dress. "Chloe also mentioned," I said, my voice turning to ice again, "that I stole David from her in college. That's the story she has told for years. I let out a small, bitter laugh. It's funny how memory works. I remember that time very differently. I remember the night David found her in the dorm hallway, crying her eyes out. She told him it was because I had betrayed her. But David and I both know who she was really crying over, don't we, Chloe? I saw a flash of pure panic in her eyes. It was a secret she thought was buried forever. I could see the event staff starting to move. A man with a headset was speaking urgently, pointing at me, then at the sound booth in the back of the room. They were going to cut me off. My time was running out. I had saved my best material for last, and I had to deliver it before they silenced me. I had to make this count. This wasn't just for me. This was for the 17-year-old girl who was never allowed to speak, and for the son I never knew. But enough about the past, I said, raising my voice slightly so everyone could hear. Let's talk about the future. Chloe's bright, shiny new future. I looked directly at her new husband, Greg. Before they cut my mic, I think you, Greg, and all your lovely guests should know about a phone call I received last week. It was from a woman who works at your downtown office. She had a very interesting story to tell me about you, and about the real reason you were so eager to get married. Greg's face went from rich, handsome groom to cornered animal in a split second. All the color drained away, leaving a pale, sweaty mask of fury. What did you say? He hissed, but his voice was drowned out by a loud screech as a security guard finally tackled the sound system. The microphone went dead. But my words still hung in the air, heavy and poisonous, like smoke. Chloe grabbed his arm, her voice a shrill cry. Greg? What is she talking about? Who is Sarah? Their perfect wedding portrait was cracking right down the middle. Before they cut the sound, I had made sure my last words were clear and sharp. I saw it in the eyes of the guests. I saw it in the face of my father, a man who cared about money more than anything. He was staring at Greg, his new, wealthy son-in-law, as if seeing him for the first time. I had not come with proof or evidence. I didn't need to. All I needed to do was plant a single seed of doubt. And in the silent, ruined ballroom, I could already see it starting to grow, its roots wrapping around the foundation of Chloe's new life. Greg lunged toward the stage, his face twisted in a mask of rage. You're lying, he screamed. But before he could take another step, David was there. My husband, my quiet, gentle David, stepped in front of me. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, solid as a rock, a silent wall between me and the storm. That single action spoke louder than any shout. It told everyone in the room, I'm with her. The security guards, finally arriving, didn't know who to grab. The bride was crying, the groom was screaming, and I just stood there, calm in the eye of the hurricane I had created. The chaos of the ballroom swirled around me, but my mind went back to another chaotic night. A college dorm hallway. I remembered finding Chloe sobbing, her mascara running down her face. In her version of the story, she was crying because I had stolen David. But that wasn't the truth. She was crying because her real boyfriend, a boy named Liam, had just broken up with her. He told her she was cruel and selfish, and he didn't want to be with someone like that anymore. David had been walking by. He saw her tears and stopped to help. That night, David saw the real Chloe for the first time. He listened as she immediately began twisting the story, telling him, between fake sobs, that she was heartbroken because she had loved him, David, all along, and that I had gotten in the way. It was a lie designed to make her the victim and to hurt me. But David saw right through it. He saw the manipulation. He offered her a tissue, said he was sorry she was hurting, and walked away. A week later, he asked me out for coffee. He didn't want the sun. He wanted the person who had been living in the shadows. Back in the present, I turned away from my screaming sister and her terrified husband. I looked at my parents. Their faces were a mess of shame and anger. The perfect party for their perfect daughter was ruined. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at my mother. This is what you wanted, isn't it? I asked, my voice quiet but clear. You spent my whole life protecting Chloe, cleaning up her messes, and hiding my pain. You wanted everything to be perfect. Well, here it is. Here is your perfect day. My mother finally looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of regret or sorrow for me. They were tears of embarrassment. She wasn't crying for the daughter she had hurt, she was crying for the party that was ruined. In that single, cold look, a part of me that had been hoping for her love for 32 years finally died. It was a painful moment, but it was also freeing. I no longer needed anything from her. I was finally, truly, on my own. "You've always been jealous of me," Chloe shrieked, her voice raw. "You ruin everything." Some of the guests were starting to gather their things, their faces awkward as they tried to leave without being noticed. The whispers were everywhere. "Did you hear what she said? Pension funds?" I always thought he was too good to be true. The illusion was not just cracked, it was completely shattered. My work here was done. I had taken her perfect day and turned it into a nightmare she could never wake up from. David took my hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Let's go home," he murmured, his voice a safe harbor in the storm. He started to lead me away from the chaos, past the stunned faces of my family and the accusing eyes of the groom. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the heat of the world I had just set on fire on my back. Just as we reached the exit, a buzzing sound came from my purse. I pulled out my phone, thinking it was a call from a concerned friend. It was a text message. From a number I didn't recognize. The first message made my breath catch in my throat. It said, "I'm glad you told them. He deserved it. S." It was from Sarah, Greg's employee. But before I could even process that, a second text from the same number appeared. My whole body went cold. The message had only 9 words, but they hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the revenge, the wedding, and everything else out of my head. It said, "Now you need to know the truth about what happened to your son." I stood frozen in the grand doorway of the wedding hall, the sounds of my sister's ruined party fading behind me. My husband David was gently pulling my hand, trying to lead me to the car, but I couldn't move. My feet were cemented to the floor. I read the words on my phone's screen for a 10th time. "Now you need to know the truth about what happened to your son." The world tilted. The revenge I had just served felt like a distant, childish game. This was real. This was everything. A son I was told I could never know, a past I was told was buried forever. David saw the blood drain from my face. "Karen? What is it?" "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice thick with concern. I couldn't find my own voice to answer him. My throat was a desert. I simply turned the phone and showed him the screen. I watched his eyes scan the words. His grip on my hand tightened. He looked from the phone to my face and back again. The anger he felt for my sister was instantly washed away by something much deeper. He wrapped a protective arm around me and guided me into the quiet darkness of the parking lot. The car ride home was completely silent. The streetlights passed by in a blur. I was no longer in the car. I was 15 years in the past, in a cold, white hospital room. David didn't push. He just drove, letting the silence be what I needed it to be. When he finally pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, he turned to me. "Karen," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Tell me everything. No more secrets. Please." He wasn't angry. He was heartbroken for me. And so, I told him. For the first time in our 5 years of marriage, I told him the full story. I told him about Mark, the boy with the kind eyes. I told him about the 2 pink lines on the test that changed my world. I told him about my parents' cold, hard faces, their talk of shame and scandal, and their plan to send me away. I explained how they made me feel like I was a dirty secret that needed to be cleaned up and hidden away so their perfect lives could continue undisturbed. My mind fell back into the sharpest memory of all. The hospital. I was 17, alone, and terrified. They let me hold him for 5 minutes. He was so small, so perfect. He had a patch of dark hair, just like mine. I counted his fingers and his toes. I whispered to him that I loved him, and that I was so sorry. My mother stood by the door, holding a clipboard with the adoption papers. She wouldn't look at me. She just said, "It's time, Karen. Sign the papers." It was a closed adoption. They told me I would never see him again. The nurse, a kind woman with sad eyes, told me his new parents were wonderful people who had waited for a child for a very long time. I signed the papers. My tears dripped onto the ink, smudging my name. "It's for the best," my mother said as she took the clipboard. "Now we can forget this ever happened." But I didn't forget. I never forgot. Every year on his birthday, I would light a single candle and blow it out in a silent wish that he was happy, that he was healthy, and that he felt loved. Back in the car, tears were streaming down my face. David didn't say anything. He just pulled me into his arms and held me while I cried. He held me until the storm inside me quieted to a soft rain. When I finally pulled away, he looked me in the eyes. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "Okay. We're in this together. If there's a truth we need to find, we will find it." Just as he said those words, giving me the first ray of hope I'd felt all night, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. I snatched the phone, my heart pounding against my ribs. The new message was short and chilling. "Don't talk to your parents about this. They lied to you about more than you know. The adoption wasn't what they told you it was." I read the words, and a cold dread seeped into my bones. What could that mean? How could an adoption not be what they said it was? I had signed the papers. I had been in the hospital. It had all felt so real, so final. My parents. The architects of my secret shame. They had not only forced me to give up my child, but they had also lied about it. The betrayal I felt at the wedding was nothing compared to this. This was a betrayal of my whole life, of the one thing that had caused me the most pain. This mysterious woman, Sarah, who had handed me the weapon to destroy my sister's wedding, was now telling me my parents had done something far, far worse. With shaking hands, I typed a reply. 3 simple words. "Who are you?" My thumb hovered over the send button. Was I ready for this? Was I ready to uncover a truth that could be more painful than the lie I had lived with for 15 years? I looked at David, and he nodded, giving me the strength I needed. I pressed send. We sat there in the dark, silent car, watching the screen, waiting for an answer. The 3 little dots that meant she was typing appeared. Then, just as quickly, they vanished. The 3 little dots blinked, a promise of an answer, and then vanished into nothing. Silence. My question, "Who are you?" hung unanswered in the dark car. We waited. 1 minute. 5. 10. Nothing came. The flicker of hope I had felt began to dim, replaced by a familiar, cold dread. Was this a cruel joke? Did someone at the wedding hear my story and decide to play a sick prank? David squeezed my hand. Maybe their phone died, he suggested, but we both knew it was a weak hope. We were back where we started, with a new, impossible question and no one to answer it. We walked into our quiet house, a place that had always felt like a warm, safe haven. Tonight, it felt like a cage. Every corner was filled with the ghosts of the children we couldn't have, and now, the ghost of a child I once did. David made us both tea, a simple, normal act in a world that had suddenly become anything but normal. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the blank screen of my phone, my whole body tense. I felt like I was 17 all over again, waiting for a verdict that would decide the rest of my life. Suddenly, the phone rang, its cheerful tone making me jump. The screen lit up with a picture of my mother. My heart hammered against my ribs. David saw my face and gave a slight shake of his head, reminding me of Sarah's warning, "Don't talk to your parents." I let the call go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up. I listened to the message on speaker. It was my mother's voice, frantic and sharp. Not once did she ask if I was okay. It was all about the family, the embarrassment, the scandal. "How could you do this to us, Karen? After everything we did for you?" Her words sealed it. She was not on my side. She never was. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of terrifying questions. What could be the truth about my son? Did the loving family I imagined for him even exist? Was he safe? Was he happy? Or was the lie something much, much darker? Every possibility felt like a stab to the heart. David lay beside me, his hand resting on my back, a silent, steady anchor in the dark. He didn't sleep either. He was standing guard over my broken heart, and I loved him more in that moment than ever before. The morning sun brought no relief, only a gray, tired light. Over coffee, we knew we couldn't just sit and wait anymore. We had to do something. "Let's start with what we know," David said, his voice practical and calm. "The hospital." "What was it called?" My voice was raspy from lack of sleep. "St. Jude's," I whispered. It was a small charity hospital in Eastgate, 2 towns over. It was a tiny thread, 15 years old and frayed, but it was the only one we had. It was a start. As David opened his laptop to search for information on a hospital that probably didn't exist anymore, my phone buzzed on the table. We both froze. It was a text from the same unknown number. My hands shook so badly I could barely unlock the screen. It wasn't an answer to my question from last night. It was something else. An instruction. A clue. My breath hitched in my throat as I read the words aloud to David, each one landing like a stone. "I can't tell you who I am. It's not safe for me," the message read. "But I will help you. Your parents didn't use a real adoption agency, Karen. They paid someone directly to make the problem go away. You need to find a nurse who used to work in the maternity ward at St. Jude's. Her name was Maria Sanchez." I read the message twice. Paid someone directly. The words sounded ugly, illegal. This wasn't just a lie about who adopted him, it was a lie about the adoption itself. 1,000 new questions exploded in my mind. If it wasn't a legal adoption, then what was it? Did my parents sell my baby? The thought was so monstrous I felt sick. David saw the panic in my eyes and took charge. "Maria Sanchez," he repeated, typing the name into the search bar. "Let's focus on that." The first few results were dead ends. St. Jude's Hospital had been torn down 5 years ago. Records were lost or destroyed. My hope began to sink again. Then, David clicked on a link. It was an online obituary for a doctor who had worked at St. Jude's for 40 years. In the comments section, people shared memories. And there it was. A comment from an old colleague mentioned the doctor's favorite nurse, Maria Sanchez, and how she had retired to a quiet nursing home called Oak Haven in a town 3 hours north of us. We had it. A name and a place. A real, solid lead. A new energy surged through me. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but for the first time, I felt a spark of power. I was not just the girl things happened to anymore. I was a mother looking for her son. As I went to our bedroom to pack an overnight bag, my phone buzzed one last time. It was Sarah. Her message was a stark warning. "Be careful," it said. "Mark's family is very powerful. They think this secret is buried forever." The phone felt heavy in my hand, the warning from Sarah glowing on the screen. "Mark's family is very powerful." I showed the text to David. For a moment, a cold wave of fear washed over me. This was no longer just about my family's lies. We were stepping into a much bigger, more dangerous world. These were people with money and influence, people who could make problems, and maybe even people, disappear. I looked at David, expecting to see the same fear in his eyes. Instead, I saw a hard, determined glint. "Good," he said quietly. "If they want it hidden this badly, it must be worth finding." As we got into the car, I thought about Mark's family, the Prestons. They were like royalty in our town. Mark's father was Judge Preston, a man whose picture was always in the local paper. He was famous for being tough, for sending people to jail for a long time. His family was seen as perfect. A perfect wife, a perfect son, a perfect daughter. I was the secret stain on their perfect picture. Now I understood why my parents were so terrified. They weren't just protecting their reputation, they were afraid of the judge. The 3-hour drive felt like crossing into another country. We left our familiar world behind and drove towards a truth I wasn't sure I could handle. The highway stretched on, and every mile took me further from the life I knew. I found myself watching the rearview mirror, my heart jumping every time a car stayed behind us for too long. Sarah's warning had planted a seed of paranoia. Were we being foolish? Were we walking into a trap? This powerful family wanted the secret buried. What would they do to someone who was trying to dig it up? Halfway there, my phone rang again. This time it was my father. His voice was not loud and angry like my mother's. It was worse. It was cold, quiet, and full of command. "Karen, I know what you're thinking, and you need to stop," he said, his voice low. "You are meddling with things you don't understand. For your own good, you will drop this and come home." This is not a request. It was a threat. A clear, chilling threat. I felt a surge of anger so strong it almost choked me. I hung up on him without a word. His threat made me think of Sarah. Who was she? Why was she helping me? She knew about Greg's shady business deals, and she knew about Judge Preston. How were those two worlds connected? It felt like I was a piece in a puzzle I couldn't see. Sarah was moving me around the board, but I had no idea what the game was. Was she an angel on my shoulder, or was she using my pain for a purpose I didn't understand? For now, it didn't matter. She was my only hope. David must have seen the fear on my face. He reached over and took my hand. "Talk to me, Karen," he said softly. "Don't think about them. Think about him." He started asking questions. "Do you think he likes to read, like you do? Do you think he got your smile? When we find him, the first thing I'll do is teach him how to throw a baseball." He didn't say if, he said when. He was building a bridge of hope over the dark river of my fear, and I walked across it. We finally pulled into the small town of Oak Haven. It was quiet and old, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. The nursing home, Oak Haven, was at the end of a long road lined with ancient, drooping trees. It looked more like a haunted mansion from a movie than a place of care. A shiver went down my spine as David turned off the engine. Maria Sanchez was in there. The woman who held 15 years of my secrets in her memory. We walked through the front doors into a room that smelled of floor polish and fading flowers. A woman with gray hair sat behind a tall desk, looking at us over the top of her glasses. My palms were sweaty, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tried to make my voice sound normal as I asked the question that could change everything. "We're here to see Maria Sanchez, please." I held my breath, waiting for her answer. The woman typed the name into her computer, her clicking filling the silent room. "Maria Sanchez," she said, her voice flat. "I'm sorry, but she's not feeling well today. She gets very agitated with new people. And besides, visiting hours are almost over." My heart plummeted. To be this close, only to be turned away. It felt like a door slamming shut in my face. David started to argue, but an idea, a desperate gamble, popped into my head. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Please," I said, putting every ounce of emotion I had into the word. "My name is Karen. I'm not just a visitor. I think Maria was the nurse who was there when my son was born, a long time ago." The receptionist's professional mask slipped. Her eyes widened, and a flicker of something, recognition, fear, passed over her face. "Sanchez," she repeated, her voice now a hushed whisper. She glanced nervously down the long, empty hallway. "Wait right here." She stood up and walked quickly down the hall, her sensible shoes squeaking on the polished floor, leaving us alone in the heavy silence. We stood in the cold, sterile lobby of the nursing home, the silence broken only by the loud ticking of a clock on the wall. Each second felt like a minute. Every shadow in the hallway looked like a threat. My mind raced with possibilities. Did the receptionist go to call security to throw us out? Or did she go to make a phone call to my parents, or worse, to the Prestons? David must have seen the panic on my face because he moved closer, a silent promise that whatever was coming, we would face it together. Finally, the receptionist reappeared at the end of the hall. Her face was pale, and she didn't speak. She just gave a small, sharp nod and beckoned for us to follow. We walked behind her down a long, quiet corridor that smelled of disinfectant and regret. The doors we passed were all closed, hiding the lives and memories of the people inside. She led us to a small, private room at the very end of the building, away from everyone else. The secrecy made the knot in my stomach tighten. Sitting in a wheelchair by the window was a tiny, frail woman. Her back was to us as she stared out at a garden where all the flowers were brown and dead. Her hands, resting on her lap, were like wrinkled paper. This had to be Maria Sanchez. My hope faltered. How could this fragile, elderly woman possibly remember one baby, one night, from 15 years ago? It felt like another dead end, another closed door. David placed a reassuring hand on my back as the receptionist quietly closed the door, leaving the three of us alone. I took a slow, deep breath and walked towards her. "Maria?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. The woman turned her head, her movements slow and stiff. Her eyes were cloudy with age, but they were surprisingly sharp. They looked right at me, and a shiver went down my spine. A small, strange smile touched her lips. "I knew you would come one day," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "I've been waiting for you." The words sent a shockwave through me. Waiting for me? How could she possibly have known? "I made a promise," Maria continued, her gaze never leaving my face. "Not to a person. I made a promise to God. I told him that if the baby's mother ever found me, I would tell the truth." She looked down at her hands. "I was a young nurse then. I had children of my own to feed. I needed the money, and I was so scared. What they did was wrong, and I have carried that guilt with me every day of my life." Her confession hung in the air, a sin she had been waiting 15 years to share. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. "What did they do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Please, just tell me the truth." Maria looked up, and a tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek. "It was not an adoption," she said, the words cutting me deeper than any lie my sister had told. "A real adoption has papers, lawyers, rules. This was a transaction. Your parents and the judge, they paid a man to make the baby disappear. To solve the problem quietly." The room started to spin. My baby was a problem to be solved. A transaction. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "Where is he?" I choked out the words. "Who has my son?" Maria shook her head slowly, her eyes full of pity. "That, I do not know," she said sadly. "I was only paid to keep my mouth shut and change the records. The man they hired, the fixer, he handled everything else. He is the only one who knows where your son went." "A fixer?" David asked, stepping forward. "Who is he? What's his name?" Maria began to tremble, looking nervously towards the closed door. "I cannot say his name," she whispered, her voice full of old fear. "The judge told me if I ever spoke of this to anyone, he would destroy my family. He was a powerful man. He still is." She reached for a small wooden box on a table beside her. With shaking hands, she opened it and pulled out an old, faded photograph. "But I can show you." I took the photograph. It was a group picture of about 20 nurses and doctors, all smiling in their uniforms in front of the old St. Jude's Hospital. "He is in the picture," Maria said. "He was not a doctor or a nurse. He worked for the hospital's board of directors. He handled their special problems." My eyes scanned the faces, searching for something, anything. "How will I know which one he is?" I asked, my voice desperate. Maria leaned forward and pointed a shaky finger at a man standing in the back row, half hidden by shadows. Unlike the others, he was not smiling. He was staring directly at the camera with cold, empty eyes that seemed to suck all the light out of the photograph. "You will know him by his eyes," Maria whispered. "And by the small silver key he always wore on a chain around his neck." Just as I saw the glint of the key in the photo, the door to the room burst open. It was the receptionist, her face a mask of pure panic. "You have to leave," she gasped. "Now." "I just got a call from Judge Preston's office. They know you're here. They're on their way." Panic exploded in the small room. The receptionist's warning, "They're on their way," was a lit match thrown on gasoline. Maria Sanchez let out a small, terrified whimper and shrank back into her wheelchair, pulling her thin shawl around her as if it were a shield. "I told you," she whispered to the empty air, "I told you they were powerful." David didn't hesitate. He grabbed my arm with one hand and snatched the precious photograph from the table with the other. His voice was low and urgent, cutting through my fear. "We're leaving. Right now. The receptionist, whose name tag read Brenda, became our frantic guide. This way. Not the front lobby, she hissed, pulling us out of the room and into a maze of back corridors. We hurried past a loud, steamy laundry room and down a hallway that smelled of bleach. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Brenda's fear was contagious. I realized she wasn't just afraid for us, she was afraid for herself. Helping us was a risk, a very big one. She was breaking a rule that had been kept in silence for 15 years. She pushed open a heavy steel door at the back of the building, and the cold afternoon air hit our faces. Go, she urged, her eyes wide with panic. Get in your car and just go. Don't stop. As I scrambled out the door, I had to ask. Why? I gasped. Why are you helping us? Brenda's face softened for just a second with a deep sadness. I had a sister, she said quickly. A long time ago. They sent her away, too. Now go. The door clicked shut, leaving us in a quiet alleyway behind the nursing home. We didn't run, we flew. We jumped into our car, the doors slamming shut. David turned the key, and the engine roared to life. He sped out of the alley and peeled out of the parking lot, the tires screaming on the asphalt. As he made the sharp turn onto the main road, I risked a look back. My blood ran cold. A sleek, black car, the kind men in movies drive, was turning slowly into the nursing home's main entrance. Its windows were tinted so dark you couldn't see inside. We weren't just paranoid. We were being hunted. The 3-hour drive home felt like an eternity. Every pair of headlights in the rearview mirror made me flinch. The world outside our car windows, which had seemed so normal on the way there, now looked sinister. Every tree could be a hiding place, every quiet side road an ambush. Judge Preston wasn't just a man anymore, he was a monster, a spider whose web I had just stumbled into. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he could feel me struggling. He knew right where we were. We finally reached our house, the one place I had always considered safe. Now, it felt like it was made of glass. We rushed inside, locking and bolting the doors, pulling the curtains shut across every window. I was shaking so hard I couldn't stand still. I laid the old photograph on the kitchen table, the only piece of evidence we had. The man's face stared up at me from 15 years ago. His eyes were the coldest things I had ever seen. He was the fixer. He was the one who had taken my son. David grabbed a magnifying glass from his desk drawer. We huddled over the photo, examining the tiny details. We could see the silver key around the man's neck more clearly now. It wasn't just a plain key. It had a small, detailed design etched into it, a bird with its wings spread wide, like an eagle or a hawk. What did it mean? Was it a clue? A symbol for a secret group? Or just a piece of jewelry? It was another question in an ocean of questions. My phone buzzed on the table, and I let out a yelp of surprise. We both stared at it. It was a text from Sarah. They know, the message read. You have to be careful. You stirred the nest. My fingers trembled as I typed back a frantic reply. How did they find us so fast? How did they know? The answer came back in seconds. The Preston Foundation is a major donor to that nursing home. They put people on the board. They have eyes and ears everywhere. A wave of nausea washed over me. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a cage. Maria Sanchez wasn't just living out her final days in a quiet retirement home. She was in a prison, watched over by the very people she was terrified of. Judge Preston hadn't forgotten about her, he had kept her close, where he could control her. The whole thing was a perfectly designed trap, and we had just walked right into the middle of it. David, who had been quietly studying the back of the photograph, suddenly went still. On the back, in faint, typed print, was a list of the people in the picture. Karen, he said, his voice strained. Look. He pointed to a name under the heading Board of Directors. It was not the fixer's name. It was a name I knew all too well, a name that made the entire world tilt sideways. The name was Greg. My sister Chloe's brand new husband. He had been on the board of that hospital all those years ago. The name stared up at me from the back of the photograph. Greg. My sister's husband. It was like finding a snake in your bed. A creature you thought you understood, a simple villain in one story, suddenly revealed to be a monster in a much older, darker one. The world seemed to tilt and shrink until the only things in it were my kitchen, my husband, and this horrifying new connection. This wasn't a coincidence. People like Judge Preston don't believe in coincidences. Greg was a piece of the puzzle, a piece that had been hidden in plain sight all along. Suddenly, everything started to make a terrible kind of sense. The phone call from Sarah about Greg's shady business deals. His marriage to my sister. Chloe's vicious attack at the wedding. It was all connected. When I stood up with that microphone, I thought I was getting revenge for a simple betrayal. I had no idea I was actually throwing a stone at a web of secrets 15 years old. I hadn't just ruined a wedding, I had threatened a conspiracy, and now the spiders were starting to crawl out of the dark. I thought about what Sarah had said. Greg was involved in a pension fund project. A man who would steal retirement money from old people is a man with no heart. He would have no problem taking money from a powerful judge to make a teenage girl's baby disappear. His marriage to Chloe wasn't a love story. It was a business deal. A merger. He was marrying into a family that shared his oldest, darkest secret. It was a way to keep everyone quiet, to lock the vault for good. A new, even more sickening thought crept into my mind. Did Chloe know? When she stood on that stage and exposed my past, was she just being cruel, or was it something more? Was it a warning? Was she trying to make me look crazy and unstable, so that if I ever started talking about the past, no one would believe me? Could my own sister, my own flesh and blood, be a part of this? The idea was so monstrous it felt like I couldn't breathe. We need to know who the fixer is, David said, his voice pulling me back from the edge. He was already working. He took a clear, close-up photo of the man's face from the picture with his phone. It's a long shot, he said, uploading the image to his computer, but some of these facial recognition programs are like magic. He clicked search, and the computer began to hum, sifting through billions of faces online, looking for the man with the cold, empty eyes. The seconds crawled by, each one stretching into an hour. While the computer searched, I sent a text to Sarah. My fingers were stiff and clumsy. Greg was on the hospital board, I wrote. The reply came back instantly, and the words made my blood run cold. I know, she wrote. That's how I found you. I've been investigating Greg for a year. He bankrupted my father's company and stole his pension. I followed the money, and it led me back 15 years. To the Preston Foundation. To that hospital. And to a story about a missing baby. The mystery of Sarah was finally solved. She wasn't an angel or a ghost. She was a daughter, just like me, fighting for her family. She was on her own path of revenge, and it had crossed with mine. Greg had ruined her life, and in trying to find justice for her father, she had stumbled upon the injustice done to me. We were not strangers. We were allies, connected by the same villain. We were two daughters fighting against the same powerful men. A loud ding from the computer made us both jump. The search was done. A single link appeared on the screen. David clicked it. It took us to an old article in a business magazine. The headline read, "The Man Who Cleans Up Corporate Messes." And there was a picture. It was him. 15 years older, his hair gray at the sides, but there was no mistaking the eyes. They were the same. The eyes of the man who had walked away with my child. The article called him a corporate security consultant. It said he was a specialist, a man the rich and powerful hired to handle their most delicate problems quietly and efficiently. And it gave us his name. Arthur Vance. My breath caught in my throat. Below his name was the motto for his security company. It read, "We hold the key to every solution." The key. The silver key he wore around his neck. It was his company logo. We had his name. Arthur Vance. The man who had taken my son. The name felt like a weapon in my hands. But what now? How do you fight a ghost, a professional keeper of secrets? As we stared at the name on the screen, frozen between terror and triumph, David's computer screen flickered and went black. A second later, a single line of white text appeared, blinking in the center of the dark screen, like a heartbeat. It said, "You should have left it alone." The words blinked on the black screen, a digital heartbeat in our dark, silent house. You should have left it alone. It felt like the monster under the bed had reached out and touched me. This wasn't a phone call or a car in the distance. This was an invasion. They were in our home, in our computer, in our lives. David reacted instantly. He lunged for the wall and ripped the internet cable out. He ran through the house, unplugging our laptops, our smart TV, everything. We were cut off, an island in a sea of technology that had just turned against us. We were completely and utterly trapped. Just as the last wire was pulled, my phone, which was on its own cellular network, lit up with a new text. I nearly screamed. But it was Sarah. I had to get you offline, the message read. That wasn't them. That was me. I faked their message. They were trying to break into your network. I sent that warning to scare you into unplugging before they could get in and wipe everything. I'm sorry I scared you, but we are running out of time. A wave of relief so powerful it made my knees weak washed over me. The monster wasn't in the house. The monster was still outside, and we had an angel guarding the door. A moment later, Sarah sent a second message. Arthur Vance is arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. He keeps records of all his jobs on a private, encrypted server. Trophies of his dirty work. I've been trying to crack it for months. Your story gave me the final piece I needed to get in. I have it all, Karen. The payment from Judge Preston. The illegal hospital records. The name of the man who signed the final paperwork. Everything. I have the whole, ugly truth in a single file. I read the words to David, and for the first time in days, we weren't afraid. We were armed. Don't go to the police, Sarah warned. Not yet. A file can be faked. The judge will have it thrown out. He'll say you're a bitter, unstable woman looking for revenge. We have to do this in a way they can't escape. We have to show the world, not just a jury. And then she told us the plan. In 2 days, the Preston Foundation was hosting its annual charity ball. It was the biggest social event of the year. Judge Preston would be on a stage, in front of a giant screen, telling everyone what a good and honest man he was. It was the perfect stage for our final act. The night of the ball was terrifying. We walked into a room dripping with diamonds and lies. I saw my sister across the room, laughing with Greg, a glass of champagne in her hand. I saw my parents, smiling and shaking hands, pretending their world wasn't a pile of ash. They all looked at me with hatred. They saw the girl who had ruined everything. They had no idea I was about to save myself. David held my hand so tight I could feel his heartbeat. We were 2 small soldiers walking into the belly of the beast. Judge Preston walked onto the stage to a loud round of applause. He stood at the podium, a picture of power and respect. Family, he began, his voice booming through the speakers. Integrity. These are the values we must all live by. As he spoke, I gave Sarah the signal with a simple text, now. The giant screen behind the judge flickered. His smiling face was replaced by a bank statement. A transfer of $200,000, 15 years ago, from the Preston Foundation to a man named Arthur Vance. The room went silent. The screen changed. It showed the original hospital record of a baby boy born to Karen Rodriguez. Then, it showed a second, forged record, claiming the baby had been born with a fatal illness and had died 2 hours after birth. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Then came the final piece of evidence. A clear, crisp copy of a birth certificate. For my son. It listed his new name, Leo, and the name of his new father. The man who had signed the certificate, the man who had raised him, was Arthur Vance. The fixer hadn't sold my baby. He had kept him. The ultimate trophy. The chaos was instant. My sister screamed. My parents stared in open-mouthed horror. Greg tried to run, but the doors were already being blocked by hotel security. Judge Preston stood on the stage, his face the color of ash, as the flash of news cameras went off like lightning. The police, who Sarah had called just moments before, began to move through the crowd. The web of lies was not just broken, it was burned to the ground for the entire world to see. A few weeks later, David and I were sitting on a park bench. A boy of about 15 walked towards us. He had dark hair, just like mine, and kind, nervous eyes. It was Leo. He had grown up believing his mother had died giving birth to him. The police had told him everything. It wasn't a Hollywood reunion. There were no hugs, no tears of joy. It was awkward and quiet and fragile. I just looked at him, my heart a painful mix of love and sorrow for the 15 years we had lost. I told him his story. I told him that I had never, ever forgotten him. My name is Karen Rodriguez. My story started with a lie at a wedding, but it ends with a truth in a park. My parents and sister have disappeared, their lives ruined by the scandal they tried so hard to hide. Judge Preston and Greg are facing years in prison. And me? I found what I was looking for. Revenge is a strange thing. It doesn't fix the past, but it can open the door to the future. I don't know what will happen with Leo, but for the first time, we have a chance. We have a beginning. If my story has moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to see that the truth is always worth fighting for. And don't forget to subscribe, because everyone has a story, and you never know when you'll hear one that changes your life. Thank you for listening.